Good morning, everyone. It looks like we have a bit of a surprise remote day, so I'm putting together a video for today's class, going over what we would have done in class and kind of showing us how we're going to do this. Okay, so before we even get started, I wanted to go over just a few updates for today. One, obviously, water's out. We can't hold classes at schools, so we're working on a remote day. Two, I will be accepting quarter one work until this week, Friday. So if you are missing anything from quarter one, you still have time to get it in and get those grades. So how it works is quarter one grade plus quarter two grade will make your semester one grade. And then your semester one grade will be your final school grade will be semester one grade plus your semester two grade. So making sure that we have our quarter one grade up and functioning is going to be kind of important. Perfect. Okay. Number three, today, since students are here, I will get to spend the time grading. So if there is work that you have turned in, I've gotten a couple emails that hasn't been graded yet. Today I'm going to get that done. If there is any questions on that, so if you're seeing, hey, at the end of this day, still not graded, shoot me an email. Just say, hey, I sent this, I put this in. It hasn't graded it yet. Or I shared it with you. Please make sure that you have it. That'd be great. And speaking of sharing, please submit to Schoology and not share in Google Drive at all possible. So I know sometimes Schoology does not accept late work or isn't working. Then you can share it with me. The problem is when it's shared with me, it quickly gets lost in the rest of the stuff that's in my Google Drive. So I'm trying to set up a system at this point, but safest way is to upload it on Schoology. And lastly, if you have any questions, feel free to email me and let me know at any point today. I'll be in communication. Okay. Perfect. So today was going to be a bit of a review day, going over what you guys should have already kind of built up to through the course of the beginning of the year, which is causes of the American Revolution. So you guys would have learned about small steps that had been happening that were slowly leading to a division between England and the British colonies here in America. And so we're going to review those quickly today, and you'll have an assignment to go over. Okay. So this is the colonies in 1740s. We are, Great Britain over here, and France is this whole huge blue area. So before, we were British, we were French here in Michigan, and same all the way up to Canada. You guys would have learned about the French and Indian War. So after that happened, England gets land all the way to the Mississippi. For the first time in about 50-ish years, England was at peace. They weren't actually actively in a war, which is crazy. Unfortunately, because of the war with the French and Indians and other wars that they had, England was in debt. They needed money. They needed a lot of money. And so their point was, we need money, so we are going to have to tax the colonies. We just went to war to protect them. And as such, they should give us taxes to take care of them. Let's see. Perfect. This out of here. So British felt that it was justified, that the taxes were going to be used to pay back the debt that the British had of protecting the colonies. After the war, they also put in this line right down here, this edge. I don't know if you guys can see it if I'm allowed to. The Proclamation Line of 1763. It essentially said, don't go anywhere behind the Appalachian Mountains. That is going to be land for the indigenous people, the Native Americans. And so this is like Britain said, don't go any farther because y'all will get into fights and we don't want fights anymore. A lot of the Native American tribes are like, yes, this is great. This is our land. It has been our land, and we don't want the colonies and British people moving in. Unfortunately, it didn't work. There are not enough British soldiers to patrol this line and prevent things from happening. So the colonists continued to expand into areas of Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, all of these areas over here, and began an era of kind of conflict and friction between Native American tribes and the colonists. And reality was, it's like a rule that was given, but never able to follow up. There weren't enough British troops to stop them, so they did it anyways. Okay, so we're just going to quick run through a few of the acts. These should be stuff that you guys already know, but one attempt at raising taxes was the Sugar Act, right? It was trying to eliminate the illegal sugar trade, so pirates and kind of the smuggling of goods in and out of cities in hopes of allowing tax revenue to come back to England. This very much so went against a lot of the colonists' economies because they had actually established a huge smuggling network for sugar and other goods to kind of try and bypass British taxes. The Stamp Act. So you had to have pay taxes for papers and legal documents. You had to stamp on a legal document saying, this has been paid for. All of these items, licenses, legal documents, newspapers. The stamp itself was very, very cheap, but it still upset a lot of colonists saying, why are you going to tax us on this? And so this also had quite a bit of pushback and anger. Next thing the British tried, so okay, we repeal that, we'll put in a different tax. So they keep on trying this, reaching, and we're going to take control, and it doesn't really quite work. So once again, the Townshend Acts essentially tried to say, we are going to have you guys house British troops in your house. Take a moment, just think. The American government comes to you and says, we are going to have soldiers live in your house. You're going to have to pay for food and everything. You even have to give them your Netflix and other streaming passwords. And they're just going to watch you and make sure that you aren't doing anything. And this kind of obviously is going to upset people. On one hand, it's yes, they might be protecting you, but also they're living in your house and kind of using your goods, and so you don't have a lot of power at the time. Townshend duties essentially said there were more taxes on lead, paint, paper, tea, and other items, and all of these essentially lit a fire under the colonies. The Townshend Acts kind of spark a huge resistance. After these guys, we see the formation of different resistance groups, Sons of Liberty, Daughters of Liberty, against the British government. Boston Massacre, you guys would have read about this. There was rioting and, there was protests and angry, gatherings of people with regards to the Townshend Acts and other taxes. A group of primarily young men started to heckle some British soldiers. The British soldiers, fearing for their lives, shot upon the group of unarmed men. This quickly became a symbol of British oppression and brutality. They are willing to kill the colonists for taxes and money. And eventually, some soldiers were tried and found guilty of manslaughter, but none were considered murderers. And so a lot of colonists felt like they got off lightly. The next big push that the British is in 1773 with the Tea Act. Essentially, they try to lower the cost of tea by saying, you can only buy from the British East India Company. This still upsetted colonists. They were like, we want to have our own choice. We don't want to go through this one company that is essentially the British government. We want to have our own choices of different companies, different teas, and be able to smuggle them in if we choose. This led to a boycott of tea by many. Tea at the time was by far the beverage of choice. Coffee was still kind of not quite around and still gaining traction. Tea was the only source of caffeine. It also made it so that you boiled the water and the water was considered kind of clean, and then you had an herbal remedy with it. So boycotting tea was a huge thing. And this really helped mobilize a lot of different people because people who maybe couldn't fight, who couldn't go out and print papers, could very easily just boycott tea. All they had to do was not drink it. So this gave power to people who usually didn't have it. In particular, colonial women were now seen as part of the revolution. They were seen as able to push and fight against the British. Not maybe physically fight, because that wasn't really quite allowed at the time, but have an economic warfare of, we won't buy your stuff, we will make it ourselves. We're not going to buy British goods. Colonial women will make it themselves. Big push, Daughters of Liberty. These are going to be the kind of most extreme of the revolutionary women. These women are actually out there participating in protests and riots in the streets, which was very unusual at the time. They were linked to the Sons of Liberty. These are kind of the Daughters of Liberty. They were also important in printing and spreading out anti-British literature and pamphlets to essentially anyone that can have them. Women were pretty well literate, so you could also easily hand them out in spaces that maybe weren't monitored by the British soldiers, such as like a women's tea time. You could be able to quickly hand them out and not feel like you were going to get in trouble. Boston Tea Party. This, as a tea lover, hurts me, but it is important to know. The big spark and final death of the Tea Act was the Boston Tea Party. The Sons of Liberty essentially decided they were going to get rid of the tea on the ships. So these ships had come in from Britain, loaded down with tea. The harbor refused to unload it, saying, "We don't want your tea." And the ship said, "Well, we won't leave until it is unloaded." And so in a fit of malicious compliance, the Sons of Liberty dressed up as Mohawk Indians, boarded the ship by force, broke open all of the boxes and chests, and threw all of the tea into the harbor. I'll have to send pictures of what it would have looked like. This isn't tea like tea bags. The tea didn't look like this. The tea would have looked like bricks almost of tea about this big or even bigger. And it was very expensive. That was a lot of lost money. And the British wanted repayment. People in Boston said, no, make us. So in retaliation, the British were like, fine, this is going to be a punishment for the Boston Tea Party. They put into place the Intolerable Acts, or the Coercive Acts. Essentially, it closed the port of Boston, saying, if you're not going to trade with us openly as the British, we're not going to let you trade at all with anyone. It got rid of the local governments in Boston and said, you must now directly speak with the government in England. Anyone who was accused of a crime no longer got to go through a local court system. They had to be tried in England. So if it was a big enough crime, they would actually take you to England for trial. And that all Bostonians would be required to house and provision troops. So if the troops came to your door saying, we need food, you had to give it to them or it would be considered a crime. These were intended as punishments. They were intended to be extreme. But the British had made a mistake. When they did this, they made the people who lived in Massachusetts martyrs. They had made them stand out as, having fought valiantly for the cause. And so every other colony, the Carolinas, New York, they saw what was happening in Massachusetts, and all of a sudden, they're also against what was going on. They maybe hadn't been on either side previously, but now we're very much so on the side of Massachusetts. They said British can't and shouldn't be able to do this, and we want to have more freedoms. And so with that in mind, the colonies call the First Continental Congress. They call for representatives from every colony to meet in Philadelphia to speak about what they're going to do about the British. They come to 4 major decisions at this time. 1, so they rejected a plan for a colonial union under British authority. So essentially, they're saying, we are not going to fall fully under British authority. They create a statement of grievances. So they create a letter saying, these are the problems that we have. They try to give recommendations as far as, how to fix it. But if it doesn't work, they recommend each colony start to make military preparations for defense against an attack by the British. And lastly, they agreed on a non-importation, non-exportation, and non-consumption of all British goods. So number 4 is a big one. Number 4 pretty much says our major trade partner that we had, where we get a lot of our food and goods from, no more. We will not trade with them anymore. And this, more than probably the other ones at the time, really, really got England because they had used to this. They had made a lot of money on this trade. Okay, so we're going to pause here. So we paused, and now it's going to be looking at what we're looking at for today. So a lot going on. I know it's been a long recording, but today's assignment is actually pretty short. You should have a familiarity with all of these events. And today we're just looking to put them into a timeline. So it took many events, many different steps to move American colonists from the British to fighting for independence. You would have read about most of these in previous chapters, but if you need a quick refresher, if it wasn't in the PowerPoint, feel free to click here and scroll down, and it'll give you a quick summary of all of them here. What you are to do, okay, got it, perfect. Tell me the year that it happened and its significance. So why is this important? So you don't copy and paste this whole paragraph. Don't do that. One sentence, why is this important? So for example, we'll do one, salutatory neglect. So this was pretty much from the beginning of the policy, but we'll say 1607. Pretty much from the beginning of the colonies up until post-French and Indian War. Why is this important? Salutatory neglect. This is important because it set the idea, right, that the British didn't/couldn't control that, or you could say it allowed the colonies self-government. A bunch of different reasons. Really only need one sentence explaining why this is important towards the revolution. And then continue on, reading through each section if you need, and just filling in the timeline. Final question will be, which event do you think was the most important? So which event do you think was the most important as far as leading towards revolution? You can pick any one. There really is no right or wrong answer unless you don't explain why. So you could say, I believe this was most important because, and give me a reason. A good reason, not like because elephants. So give me a reason why you think that is true. I think that should be it. This should be up on Schoology and available for you guys to go through and look at. I'm still working on Schoology, so we'll get that to you quickly. But if you have any questions at all, do feel free to email me, and we'll make sure to go over anything that you have questions on. You can also, some of these have links here in the descriptions. Feel free to follow the links if you want to learn more. These are actually videos and quick web pages. So if you're like, I want to learn a little bit more about this, feel free. Or if you want to say this is the most important event, you might want to click the link and it'll explain a little bit of why. Okay, so that's all that we have for today. I know it's a little bit long video, I'm hoping to make this a little bit shorter in the future. Have a good one, and I will talk to you guys hopefully tomorrow. Bye, crew.